An orphan girl cried from hunger in the fields, until a lone cowboy did what nobody else would. The sun was high in the sky, beating down on the wide, empty fields that stretched as far as the eye could see. The land was dry and dusty, and the heat made everything feel heavy and still. In the distance, there were small farms and cottages, but they seemed far away from one another, isolated in the endless expanse of earth. In this lonely place, a young girl walked slowly, her feet bare, her clothes tattered and faded from the sun. Her hair was tangled and dusty, and her eyes were wide and alert, scanning the fields for anything she could eat. She was very small, no more than 10 years old, but the life she had lived had made her seem older, her face showing a quiet sadness that went far beyond her years. The girl had no name that anyone called her by these days. People in the nearby village sometimes whispered about a little orphan girl who wandered the fields. Some said she was a ghost child, appearing out of nowhere. Others simply avoided her, saying she was trouble or that they had enough problems of their own. The truth was that she had lost her parents when she was very young. Illness and misfortune had taken them both, leaving her alone in a world that seemed too big and too cruel for someone so small. From that day on, she had been fending for herself, learning to survive in ways that children should never have to. In the mornings, she would wake up on the hard ground, often under a tree or inside a broken shed. She had no warm bed or soft blankets, only the earth beneath her and the sky above. Her stomach ached constantly from hunger, and she often went days without proper food. Sometimes she would find leftover scraps from the farmer's fields, a small piece of bread, a forgotten vegetable, or a handful of berries, but it was never enough. Still, she never gave up completely. Every day she walked through the fields, hoping that somehow she would find something that could fill her empty stomach, even for a moment. The fields were vast and quiet. The wind moved gently over the tall grass, bending the stalks and carrying the faint smell of dry earth. Birds occasionally flew overhead, their calls sharp and clear in the silence. For the girl, the fields were both a place of danger and a place of hope. Sometimes she would stumble upon wild fruits or edible plants, and those moments would feel like small victories. But mostly, the fields reminded her of how alone she really was. She often thought about the family she had lost, about the warmth of a mother's hug or a father's comforting words. Those memories were like flickering lights in her mind, sometimes comforting, sometimes cruel. One afternoon, the sun was relentless, and the girl had been walking for hours. Her feet were sore, her lips dry, and her stomach gnawed with emptiness. She sat down on a small mound of dirt and looked around. The horizon was empty, the farms far away, and no one was coming to help her. She felt a wave of hopelessness wash over her. Tears pricked her eyes, but she tried to hold them back. Still, after a moment they fell, quietly at first, then faster, sliding down her dusty cheeks. Her sobs were soft but full of all the pain she had carried for so long. She felt invisible, as if the world had forgotten she existed. She remembered the times she had tried to approach villagers. She had walked to the edge of their fields, hoping for a kind word or a handout. But most people had turned away. Some had shouted at her to leave, others had ignored her completely. She had learned quickly that asking for help was dangerous. People could be cruel, or at least indifferent, and in a place like this, cruelty was often hidden behind polite words or cold glances. She had become careful, learning to watch from a distance, to observe the villagers as they worked in their fields, their lives full and comfortable while hers was empty and hungry. The girl closed her eyes for a moment, letting the sun warm her face. She thought about food. Anything would do, a piece of bread, some fruit, even a handful of grains. Her mind wandered to the small stories she had heard from other children who had lived in villages long ago, stories of feasts and warm homes, of laughter and security. For a fleeting moment, she imagined what it would be like to belong somewhere, to have someone care for her. But when she opened her eyes, she was still sitting in the dry field, alone and cold inside despite the heat. Hours passed, and the shadows grew longer. The girl tried to stand, her legs trembling from exhaustion. She wandered toward a small stream she had found a few days ago, hoping to drink the cool water. When she reached it, she knelt and took a long sip, letting the water trickle over her dry lips. It gave her some relief, but her hunger remained. She looked at her reflection in the water and saw a small, tired face staring back at her, eyes wide and fearful, yet filled with a quiet determination. She had survived this long, and somehow, she told herself, she would survive a little longer. Even as night approached, the girl did not rest. She knew the fields could be dangerous after dark. Wolves sometimes wandered near the edges, and the cold wind cut through her thin clothes. She found a small cluster of bushes and crawled under them, curling up as best she could. The stars began to appear one by one in the darkening sky, and she looked up at them, wondering if anyone else was watching over her. She whispered a quiet prayer, not sure if anyone could hear it, hoping that somehow tomorrow would bring something better. A kind face, a little food, a warm place, anything to ease the pain that had become her daily companion. Even though she was exhausted, hunger kept her alert. She listened to every sound, the rustle of leaves, the distant calls of birds, the footsteps of animals in the distance. Every shadow seemed alive, every movement a possible threat. Yet in her heart there was still a tiny spark of hope. She believed that maybe, just maybe, someone would notice her, someone who would see her not as a nuisance or a burden, but as a child who needed help. The night passed slowly. The girl dozed in fits and starts, waking whenever the wind blew too hard or a distant animal moved too close. Her dreams were full of food, of laughter, and of the family she had lost. When she woke again, the first light of dawn was spreading over the fields, painting everything in soft gold and pink. She rose slowly, brushing the dirt from her clothes, and continued her journey across the fields. Her stomach was still empty, but she carried a quiet determination to survive, to find something, anything to eat. She walked for hours, searching for food or water, her body weak and trembling. The fields seemed endless, and the sun was harsh overhead. She thought about giving up, about sitting down and letting the world forget her completely. But something inside her refused to surrender. She remembered her parents' faces, remembered the stories they had told her, and she held onto that memory as if it were a lifeline. She would not give up, not yet. By late afternoon, the girl was barely able to stand. Her legs ached, her lips were cracked and dry, and her stomach was screaming for food. She found herself in a small hollow between two hills, where the wind was softer and the sun less harsh. She sank to the ground, her arms wrapped around her knees, and let herself cry again. These were not tears of weakness, but tears of survival, tears of a life that had been too hard for one so small. And in that quiet, lonely place, her soft cries carried across the fields. She had no idea if anyone would hear her. She had grown used to being invisible, to living in a world where kindness was rare and survival came first. Yet she cried anyway, letting the pain out, hoping that somehow someone might notice. Someone might care. The fields were silent, save for the rustle of the grass and the distant calls of birds. But somewhere beyond the hills, a figure rode slowly on horseback, scanning the horizon. Unseen by the girl, this stranger was about to notice her, and the world she had known, empty, harsh, and cruel, was on the verge of changing in ways she could never have imagined. For now she remained alone, a tiny figure in the vast, empty fields, her small body trembling from hunger, her heart heavy with loneliness, yet still beating with the quiet strength that had kept her alive this long. The sun dipped lower in the sky and the shadows grew long, wrapping around her like a blanket she did not have. She closed her eyes once more, letting the world hold her just for a moment, and whispered into the wind a simple, silent plea. Please, someone notice me. The girl's soft cries had drifted across the fields, carried by the warm afternoon wind. She had no idea that someone had noticed her. Somewhere beyond the hills, a lone figure moved slowly on horseback, his hat pulled low to shield his eyes from the harsh sun. The cowboy was a quiet man, a traveler who had spent most of his life alone, moving from one small town to another, never staying long, never asking for much. He had seen many people in his time, some kind, some cruel, and he had learned to keep his distance from the world. Yet something about this place, about the faint sound of a child crying, made him pause. He urged his horse to a slower pace, scanning the golden fields. At first, he thought it might be an animal, or perhaps the wind playing tricks on his ears. But then he saw her, a tiny figure sitting in the dirt, her shoulders trembling as she cried. She was so small and fragile-looking that she seemed almost like a part of the earth itself. He pulled gently on the reins, bringing his horse to a stop a short distance away, and watched her quietly. She did not notice him at first, lost in her own pain and hunger. For a moment, the cowboy simply observed. He had seen hardship before, but something about this girl touched him deeply. He could see the fear in her eyes, the emptiness in her face, and the hunger that seemed to weigh her down like an invisible chain. He felt a pang in his chest, a reminder of the hardships he had faced as a boy long ago, when the world had been unkind to him as well. He had learned to survive on his own, but he had never forgotten the kindness of those rare souls who had helped him along the way. Slowly he approached, his horse moving carefully through the uneven ground. The girl noticed him then, and her eyes widened. She flinched at first, unsure if this was another person who would chase her away, another villager who would turn a blind eye. But there was something different about him. His movements were gentle, his voice calm, and there was a warmth in his eyes that she had not seen in a long time. "Hey there, little one," he said softly, dismounting from his horse. He did not rush toward her or make sudden movements. "Are you hungry?" The girl looked at him, unsure how to answer. She had grown used to rejection, to being ignored or shouted at. She hesitated, then nodded slowly, her lips trembling. "Yes, very," she whispered. The cowboy nodded, crouching down so he was closer to her level. He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a small piece of bread and some dried fruit he had packed for his journey. "Here," he said kindly, "eat this. It's not much, but it will help for now." The girl stared at the food, her hands shaking. She had not had a proper meal in days, and the simple act of being offered food brought tears to her eyes. Slowly, she took the bread, biting into it hungrily, her small hands shaking as she ate. She had never felt such relief, never felt the warmth of someone showing her genuine care. As she ate, the cowboy watched her quietly. He did not speak much, allowing her to eat at her own pace. He noticed the dirt on her face, the tangled hair, the holes in her clothes, and the small cuts on her hands and knees. It was clear she had been surviving on her own for a long time, and the thought made him both sad and determined. "Where are your parents?" he asked gently, not wanting to frighten her. The girl paused, looking down at the ground. She had been asked this question many times before, and it always hurt. They're gone," she said softly. "I don't have anyone." The cowboy nodded, understanding without needing more explanation. Loss was a part of life, and though he could not bring her parents back, he could offer something just as important: care, protection, and hope. He reached out his hand slowly, and after a moment of hesitation, the girl took it. She felt the strength in his hand, steady and reassuring, and for the first time in many days, she felt a sense of safety. He helped her to her feet and led her to the shade of a nearby tree. "You need rest," he said. "You've been walking for hours. You must be very tired." The girl sank down under the tree, feeling the rough bark against her back. She ate the remaining dried fruit slowly, savoring every bite. The cowboy sat a short distance away, keeping watch over her. He knew that trust could not be forced, that kindness had to be shown quietly and steadily. As they sat together, he learned more about her life. She told him in small, broken sentences about the days she had spent alone, about the hunger that never seemed to leave her, about the nights she had cried herself to sleep in the cold. She spoke of the villagers who ignored her, of the fields she had roamed, and of the small scraps of food she had scavenged to survive. Each word painted a picture of a life that was hard and lonely, a life that no child should ever have to endure. The cowboy listened, his heart heavy but resolute. He could not undo the pain she had suffered, but he could do something. He could show her that there was kindness in the world, that there were people willing to help, even when it seemed no one else would. He had made a choice, a quiet decision that would change both of their lives forever. "Tomorrow," he said gently, "we'll find a safe place for you, a place where you can rest, eat, and not be afraid. I promise you won't have to be alone anymore." The girl looked at him, unsure if she could trust his words. Trust was difficult for her. People had promised things before and then left her behind. But there was something different in his eyes, something that made her want to believe. She nodded slowly, a small spark of hope lighting up in her chest. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the fields, the cowboy and the girl remained under the tree. The girl leaned against him slightly, feeling the warmth of his presence. She was still weak, still hungry, but for the first time in a long while, she felt a small measure of comfort. The world had not been entirely cruel. There was someone who cared, someone willing to stop and help when no one else would. The cowboy knew the road ahead would not be easy. There were villagers who might question his choice to help her, who might even try to discourage him. But he had seen enough suffering in his life to know that one act of kindness could make a difference. Even if no one else helped, he would. Even if the world turned its back, he would not. That night he built a small fire near the tree, careful to keep it low and safe. He shared a little of his own food with her, some dried meat and bread, and helped her drink water from a small container he carried. The girl ate quietly, her eyes wide and alert, absorbing every bit of warmth and care she could find. She was learning that there could be safety in someone else's presence, that a stranger could become a protector, even without asking for anything in return. As the stars appeared in the sky, the girl finally curled up to rest, her head on a folded piece of cloth the cowboy had made into a pillow. She felt her body relax for the first time in days. Sleep came slowly but surely, and as she drifted off, she felt a quiet hope stir inside her. Perhaps tomorrow would bring something better. Perhaps tomorrow she would begin to feel what it meant to belong somewhere. The cowboy watched over her through the night, keeping the fire small but steady. He thought about his own life, about the loneliness he had endured, and about the small moments of kindness that had made a difference along the way. Now it was his turn to be that difference for someone else. He resolved quietly to do whatever it took to help her, to make sure she would not suffer as she had before. When morning came, the girl awoke to the soft light of dawn, feeling slightly stronger and more hopeful. The cowboy had already prepared a small breakfast, and he encouraged her to eat. She did so slowly, savoring each bite, and felt the energy returning to her small, fragile body. For the first time in what felt like forever, she felt a glimmer of possibility, a chance to survive, to grow, to perhaps even be happy. The cowboy helped her to her feet, brushing the dirt from her clothes. "Today," he said gently, "we'll start a new journey. You won't have to be alone anymore. We'll find a safe place and I'll make sure you are cared for. You deserve that and more." The girl looked at him, her eyes wide and shining with unshed tears. She had lived so long with fear and hunger that it was almost unbelievable to hear such words. And yet, the sincerity in his voice, the strength in his presence, made her want to believe. Slowly, she nodded, a small, fragile smile appearing on her lips. For the first time in a long while, the girl felt that the world might not be entirely cruel. There was someone who had noticed her, someone who had stopped to help when no one else would. And in that moment, In the quiet morning light, she began to believe that perhaps life could be kinder than she had ever imagined. The morning sun cast a golden glow across the fields as the cowboy led the young girl along a narrow dirt path. She walked slowly, her small hands clutching a piece of bread he had given her, savoring every bite. Her stomach was still empty, but the simple kindness she had received gave her a sense of hope she had not felt in a long time. She glanced at the cowboy, curious but cautious, unsure how much she could trust this quiet stranger who had suddenly become her protector. The cowboy walked beside her, steady and calm, guiding her with gentle words. "Take your time," he said. "We're not in a hurry. You need to regain your strength first." He could see the exhaustion in her eyes, the way her small body seemed to carry the weight of the world. He wanted to do more than offer food and safety. He wanted to help her find a life where she could feel secure and cared for, a life she had never known. As they walked, the cowboy asked simple questions, careful not to overwhelm her. "What's your name?" he asked. The girl hesitated, looking down at the ground. She had not been called by a real name for so long that it felt strange. I don't know," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. The cowboy nodded. "That's okay. We can figure that out later. Names are important, but right now, what matters is making sure you are safe." The girl continued to follow him, her small steps faltering now and then. The fields around them were quiet, save for the soft rustle of grass in the wind and the distant calls of birds. She had learned to notice every sound, to stay alert for danger, but with the cowboy beside her, she felt a strange sense of security. He moved with purpose but never rushed her, never forced her to go faster than she could manage. As they neared the edge of the fields, they came to a small clearing where a few trees offered shade. The cowboy stopped and knelt down, pulling a small container of water from his saddlebag. "Drink this," he said, holding it out to her. The girl took a tentative sip, the cool water soothing her dry throat. For a moment she closed her eyes and let herself relax, feeling safe for the first time in many days. "You're safe here," the cowboy said gently. "No one will hurt you, I promise." The girl looked at him, her eyes wide. She had heard promises before, promises that were broken, and she wanted to believe him but feared being disappointed again. Still, the sincerity in his voice, the calm strength in his presence made her want to trust him. Slowly, she nodded, feeling a small spark of hope begin to grow inside her. Over the next few days, the cowboy taught her simple skills that would help her survive and stay safe. He showed her how to find clean water, how to recognize edible plants, and how to move quietly through the fields without attracting attention. He did not rush her, knowing that trust and learning took time. The girl absorbed every lesson, grateful for the guidance and care. For the first time, she felt that she was not alone in the world, that someone truly cared about her well-being. The cowboy also shared a little about his own life, but only enough to help her feel connected. He spoke of the long hours on horseback, the quiet mornings in the fields, and the small joys of helping someone in need. He never spoke of wealth or power. Those things meant little to him. What mattered was kindness, protection, and doing what was right, even when others would not. Word of the girl's presence slowly spread through the nearby village. Some villagers noticed the cowboy traveling with her and whispered among themselves. "Why is he helping her?" they asked. "She is just an orphan. There are other children to worry about." Others were more sympathetic, remembering times they had helped someone in need themselves. But for the most part, people remained distant, unsure whether to intervene or ignore what was happening. The cowboy ignored the gossip. He had made a choice, a quiet promise to the girl, and he would not let the opinions of others sway him. His focus was on her safety and her growth, on ensuring that she would not return to the days of hunger and fear that had dominated her life. As the girl gained strength, she began to trust him more. She walked taller, spoke more freely, and even smiled at small things. A butterfly landing on a flower, the soft murmur of a stream, the warmth of the sun on her face. These were things she had forgotten, simple joys that had been missing from her life for too long. With the cowboy by her side, she began to feel like a child again, not just a survivor struggling alone in the fields. One afternoon, as they rested by a small stream, the girl asked, "Will I ever have a home?" Her voice was small, almost fearful, as if asking the question might be too bold. The cowboy looked at her and smiled gently. "Yes," he said, "you will have a home. It may not be perfect, and it may take time, but you will have a place where you are safe, where you are cared for, and where you can grow." The girl felt a warmth in her chest she had never felt before. For so long, she had believed that she would always be alone, that the world had no place for her. But now, for the first time, she believed that someone cared enough to help her build a future. She nodded slowly, a small but genuine smile appearing on her lips. The cowboy continued to teach her about life in the fields, about respecting nature and understanding the rhythms of the land. He showed her how to help with small chores, how to care for animals, and how to keep herself healthy and clean. These lessons were practical, but they were also lessons in dignity and self-respect. The girl began to feel a sense of pride in herself, realizing that she was capable of learning and growing, even after so much hardship. As days turned into weeks, the bond between the cowboy and the girl grew stronger. He became a mentor, a protector, and a friend. She began to trust him fully, relying on his guidance and feeling safe in his presence. For the first time, she experienced the comfort of knowing someone truly cared about her well-being. One day, the cowboy took her to the edge of the village, keeping a careful distance to avoid drawing too much attention. He wanted her to see that there were people around who could be kind, who could offer help and support if she needed it. The girl watched the villagers going about their daily lives, tending fields, carrying baskets, talking quietly. She realized that not everyone was cruel or indifferent. Some people simply did not notice her before. The cowboy spoke softly. "See, there are kind people here too. We can start slowly, letting them see you, letting them know you exist. But remember, you are safe first. We will not rush anything." The girl nodded, understanding that trust took time and that kindness sometimes needed patience. She felt a quiet determination to continue learning, to continue growing, and to continue trusting the world little by little. As they returned to the fields, the cowboy noticed something he had not seen before. The girl was walking taller, moving with more confidence. Her eyes were bright, her steps purposeful. She was still small, still vulnerable, but she was beginning to carry herself with a quiet strength. The cowboy felt a sense of satisfaction, knowing that his efforts were making a difference. Over time, the girl began to help him with small tasks, learning the value of hard work and responsibility. She gathered firewood, helped care for animals, and learned how to prepare simple meals. Each task gave her a sense of accomplishment, a feeling that she was capable and valuable. The cowboy encouraged her at every step, offering gentle praise and guidance. One evening, as the sun set in brilliant shades of orange and pink, the girl sat quietly by the fire, watching the flames dance. She thought about how much her life had changed in such a short time. She had gone from being alone and hungry in the fields to feeling cared for and safe, learning skills that would help her survive, and most importantly, learning that she was not invisible. The cowboy joined her, sitting quietly and letting her speak first. "I never thought anyone would care about me," she said softly. "I thought I would always be alone." The cowboy smiled gently. "You are not alone anymore, and you never will be. I will make sure of that." The girl felt tears in her eyes, not of sadness this time, but of relief and gratitude. She had found someone who believed in her, someone who had chosen to care when no one else had. The fields that had once been a place of fear and hunger were now a place of learning, safety, and quiet joy. As the night grew darker, the girl felt a sense of peace she had never known. She realized that life could change, that hope could exist even after suffering, and that one person's kindness could make a difference that stretched far beyond a single moment. She closed her eyes and whispered a quiet thank you, feeling the warmth of the fire and the presence of the cowboy beside her. From that day forward, the girl's life began to transform. She still had much to learn, still had challenges to face, but she faced them with a newfound strength. She had someone who cared, someone who would not abandon her, and someone who had taught her that kindness could be a guiding light even in the darkest times. The cowboy's quiet determination had begun to change not only her life, but also the small world around them. Others in the village slowly noticed the girl's presence and the change in her demeanor. Some offered small acts of kindness, inspired by the cowboy's example. The girl began to understand that the world was not entirely cruel, that compassion existed, and that she could belong somewhere. And so, in the fields that had once echoed with her cries of hunger and fear, the girl began to walk taller, to smile more, and to embrace the small joys of life. She had survived, she had learned, and she had begun to hope. The cowboy had chosen to act when no one else would, and in doing so, he had given her the greatest gift of all, a chance to live, to grow, and to believe in the goodness of people once again. The sun rose slowly over the fields, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. The young girl awoke with a sense of calm she had never felt before. She stretched her small arms, feeling stronger than the day before, and for the first time, she realized that she no longer feared the world as she once had. The cowboy was already awake, tending to a small fire, preparing a simple breakfast of bread and warm water. He looked up and smiled at her. "Good morning," he said softly. "You slept well," the girl nodded, a small smile spreading across her face. She had learned to sleep lightly, always alert to danger, but with him by her side, she had slept peacefully through the night. It was a feeling she had almost forgotten existed, the simple comfort of safety and care. As she ate the small breakfast, she felt the warmth of the sun on her face and the quiet joy of being alive. Life had become something she could hope for, not just endure. After breakfast, the cowboy suggested they take a walk to a nearby village. "It's time you see the world beyond these fields," he said. "There are kind people there, people who can help you in ways I cannot. But remember, we will go slowly. You are in control." The girl felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. She had never been truly welcomed anywhere, and the thought of being around others was both thrilling and frightening. But she trusted him. His presence had become a source of strength, and she knew he would protect her. Holding his hand, they began the walk toward the village, moving carefully across the fields. As they entered the outskirts, the girl noticed people working in the fields, children playing near small cottages, and women carrying baskets of fresh produce. The world felt alive and busy, so different from the quiet emptiness of the fields she had wandered alone. She kept close to the cowboy, taking in the sights and sounds, slowly realizing that this place could be a home, a place where she might belong. The cowboy introduced her to a few villagers he knew. He spoke kindly, explaining that she had been alone and needed care. Some villagers were hesitant at first, unsure how to respond to a child they had never noticed before. But others smiled warmly, offering small gestures of kindness, an extra piece of bread, a gentle pat on the head, a friendly word. The girl's heart lifted with each act of kindness, and she began to understand that people could be gentle and compassionate, even if it took time to see it. Over the next weeks, the cowboy helped her adjust to life in the village. He found a small, safe place for her to stay, a modest cottage with a kind family willing to provide care and support. They welcomed her without judgment, and for the first time, she felt the comfort of a home. She learned to sleep in a real bed, to eat meals without fear, and to speak freely without worrying about being ignored or punished. Each day brought new experiences, and she embraced them with a growing sense of confidence and joy. The girl also began to attend a small school in the village. At first, she was shy and hesitant, unsure how to interact with other children, but the kindness she had experienced with the cowboy gave her courage. She made friends slowly, sharing stories of the fields and learning from others. Her eyes sparkled with curiosity, and her mind absorbed knowledge like a sponge. Reading, writing, and learning about the world became a source of excitement and pride. She realized that her past struggles did not define her, that she could grow and thrive despite the hardships she had faced. The cowboy continued to visit her, offering guidance and support whenever she needed it. He taught her practical skills, how to cook simple meals, care for animals, and handle daily responsibilities. But more importantly, he taught her about kindness, courage, and the importance of helping others. "The world can be harsh," he said one evening, "but one small act of care can change everything. Remember that always." The girl carried these lessons with her, gradually transforming from a frightened, hungry child into a confident, hopeful young girl. She began to help others in the village, sharing her food, assisting with chores, and offering a smile or kind word to those who needed it. People noticed the change in her spirit and warmth, and the village slowly embraced her as one of their own. She felt the deep satisfaction of belonging, a feeling she had never known before. One day, as the sun set over the fields, the girl walked along the path with the cowboy, her eyes reflecting the soft glow of the sky. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for everything." The cowboy smiled, placing a hand on her shoulder. "No need to thank me. You were brave and you kept going even when it was hard. I only showed you that someone cared. The rest was all you." She thought about her journey, the long, empty fields, the days of hunger and fear, and the nights spent alone under the stars. She remembered the despair she had felt, the tears she had shed, and the hope that had seemed so distant. And now she realized that she had survived, not just because of luck, but because of courage, resilience, and the quiet kindness of one person who had chosen to act when no one else would. The cowboy led her to the top of a small hill, overlooking the village and the surrounding fields. She looked out at the landscape, taking in the familiar fields where she had wandered alone, the village that had slowly become her home, and the horizon that promised new beginnings. She felt a sense of peace and accomplishment she had never known. The fields that once echoed with her cries of hunger now stood as a symbol of survival, hope, and transformation. The girl understood something important that day. Life was not only about surviving, but also about giving, caring, and growing. She realized that the cowboy's actions had not only saved her life, but had also shown her how to live with purpose, courage, and compassion. She wanted to carry that lesson forward, to help others who might be struggling, and to be a source of hope in a world that could often seem harsh and unforgiving. As weeks turned into months, the girl continued to grow stronger, more confident, and more independent. She excelled in school, developed meaningful friendships, and became an active, valued member of the village. Her past no longer held her back. Instead, it fueled her determination to succeed and to help others. She often remembered the days she had spent alone in the fields, feeling hungry and invisible, and she promised herself that she would never forget the power of kindness and compassion. The cowboy remained a steady presence in her life, a quiet guide who never sought praise or recognition. He continued his own travels, but he always returned to check on her, offering advice, support, and encouragement. The girl valued his wisdom and presence, understanding that the lessons he had taught her would shape her for the rest of her life. She felt gratitude that went beyond words, a deep understanding that one person's choice to care could change everything. One evening, as they sat together by a small fire, the girl looked up at the cowboy. "Will you always be there for me?" she asked softly. He smiled, his eyes reflecting the flames. "I will always care about you, but now you have the strength to carry on. You can face the world with courage, kindness, and hope, and someday you will help someone else just as I helped you." The girl nodded, understanding the truth in his words. She realized that the greatest gift she had received was not only safety or food, but the lesson that one person's courage and kindness could ripple through the world, touching lives in ways that could never be measured. She felt a deep sense of responsibility to carry that lesson forward, to live a life that honored the care she had been shown. As the stars appeared in the night sky, the girl felt a quiet joy and peace. She had come so far from the days of hunger and fear in the fields to a life filled with hope, love, and possibility. She knew that challenges would still come, but she also knew that she had the strength, wisdom, and courage to face them. The journey had transformed her, not only in body but in spirit, teaching her resilience, compassion, and the true meaning of hope. In the years that followed, the girl continued to grow into a kind, strong, and compassionate young woman. She never forgot the cowboy who had noticed her cries when no one else did, who had chosen to act when others looked away. She carried his lessons in her heart, sharing kindness wherever she went, helping those in need, and becoming a symbol of hope in her village. Her life became a testament to the power of one person's courage to change another's life forever. And the fields where she had once cried in hunger, the same fields that had seemed empty and harsh, were no longer a place of despair. They were a place of memory, a reminder of how far she had come, and a symbol of hope for anyone who might be lost, alone, or forgotten. She understood that even in the darkest times, kindness, courage, and compassion could create light, and that one small act could change everything. The cowboy remained a quiet figure in her life, never seeking recognition, but always there in spirit, a constant reminder that hope and goodness exist in the world. The girl's journey, from despair to hope, from loneliness to belonging, became an inspiration to all who heard her story, proving that even in a harsh and unforgiving world, one act of kindness could ripple outward, touching lives in ways that last forever. The story of the orphan girl who cried from hunger in the fields became a tale told with reverence and awe in the village. It was a story of resilience, courage, and the transformative power of compassion. People remembered not only her survival but the quiet cowboy who had shown the world that sometimes it only takes one person to make a difference. And so, the girl lived, not just surviving but thriving, carrying forward the lessons of care, hope, and courage. The loneliness, fear, and hunger of her past became the foundation of her strength. And wherever she went, she remembered the small, simple acts that had changed her life: the bread, the water, the kind words, and the unwavering presence of the man who had chosen to act when nobody else would. Her life had changed forever, not because the world had been easy, but because someone had chosen to see her, to care for her, and to give her a chance. And in that chance, she had found not only survival, but hope, joy, and a future filled with possibility.